My name is Leah Cartwright. And on the morning my brother was promoted to commander of the Atlantic Strike Division, I stood outside the security gate like a stranger. The petty officer in charge tapped furiously on his tablet, squinting beneath the Virginia sun, trying to find my name. He wouldn't. Because it wasn't there. "Sorry, ma'am," he said with a practiced tone. "You're not on the guest list for Commander Marcus Cartwright." I didn't flinch. I just adjusted the strap on my coat and nodded once. Behind him, the gates to the Grand Naval Parade Grounds opened wide, letting in a sea of guests. Retired officers in medals, families holding tiny flags. And somewhere among them, my own parents, smiling like nothing was wrong. Like they hadn't just erased me again. Then Marcus arrived. White dress uniform, impeccable smile. My brother, the family jewel, strode past without hesitation, glancing at me only long enough to murmur to his wife, just loud enough for me to hear. "Leah forgot to RSVP." Some people never learned the chain of command. I almost laughed. Because I had followed it far longer than any of them knew. I stepped aside, let the crowd swallow them, and stood in the shadow of the stone gate. Invisible again. Until a black government SUV pulled up. And the man who stepped out changed everything. When I was 8, my father taught Marcus how to shine his boots until the leather looked like water. I sat on the steps holding the polished tin, hoping he'd ask me to try. He never did. At 12, I won the regional science fair. My project on sonar detection patterns earned a certificate, a ribbon, and a single nod from my homeroom teacher. At dinner that night, my mother barely looked up from her plate. Marcus had just passed his ROTC exam with top marks. He got a cake. I got silence. That's how it always was in our house. I wasn't unloved. I was undecorated. Too quiet, too cerebral, too hard to photograph. Marcus, on the other hand, was the kind of child you could put on a recruitment poster before he turned 15. Broad shoulders, confident grin, natural posture. I learned early not to compete. I just stepped out of frame. Still, I served. I graduated from Annapolis at 23. Quietly, I went into intelligence instead of command. Not flashy, but necessary. I specialized in asymmetric warfare, counter-infiltration modeling, and ironically, narrative suppression. While Marcus climbed through the visible ranks, I disappeared behind unmarked doors and classified seals. They thought I'd left the Navy. That was the part that stung the most. Not that they ignored me, but that they assumed I'd quit. That I lacked what it took. Not once in 10 years had my father asked where I was stationed. Not once had Marcus reached out after hearing I transferred to the Pentagon. When the family spoke of the Cartwright legacy, they didn't mean me. They meant Marcus. The son. The commander. And yet, when orders needed rewriting, when a task force went dark in the Gulf, when command centers scrambled at 0200, the calls didn't go to Marcus. They went to me. But no one at that parade ground knew that. Not yet. So I stood by the gate, coat buttoned, silver bars hidden beneath civilian gray, and watched as my family walked past me like I was just another spectator. The petty officer gave me a look, apologetic, unsure, and offered me a clipboard. "Maybe if you check in under another name." I smiled politely. "That won't be necessary." Because that was the moment the black SUV rolled to a stop beside us. It didn't rush. It didn't need to. The tinted window lowered with quiet finality, and the man inside gave the young sailor a nod. "Stand down, ensign," he said. "She's not on your list because her clearance outranks yours." Then he stepped out. Admiral Rayburn. Steel-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing the kind of silence that quieted entire rooms. He looked directly at me and extended his hand. Not in greeting, but in respect. "Admiral Cartwright," he said, voice low and level. "We were starting to think you'd skip your brother's big day." I didn't answer him right away. Not because I didn't want to. But because for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Admiral Rayburn had just said my name and title loud enough for the crowd near the entrance to hear. And they did. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. The young petty officer who had tried so earnestly to check me and went pale. His hand twitched around the clipboard, then dropped it entirely. "Admiral," he stammered. I wasn't informed." "You weren't supposed to be," Rayburn said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Proceed." He turned to me and gestured forward. "Shall we?" I nodded once. Then unfastened my coat. The cool spring air brushed against my uniform, revealing the deep navy of formal dress and the twin stars on either shoulder. Gasps rippled through the front of the procession. I didn't flinch. I let the fabric fall back just enough to catch the sunlight. Rayburn fell into step beside me, and we crossed the threshold together. On the other side of the gate, it was like stepping onto a stage. Rows of crisp white chairs flanked a polished walkway. Military brass mingled with retired dignitaries. A photographer turned instinctively when he saw us, then lowered his camera just as fast when he recognized the stars. Not Marcus' stars. Mine. I could feel the weight of my parents' gaze before I saw them. My mother, pristine in a cream blazer, her pearls perfectly matched to her soft pink lipstick, blinked twice before her posture stiffened. My father, dressed in his old Navy captain's uniform, squinted like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Then I saw Marcus. He was standing near the stage, laughing with two younger officers. He looked like someone who had prepared for a spotlight his whole life and was just now realizing it was being pulled in another direction. Our eyes met. His jaw tensed. His smile faltered. He turned slightly, leaning toward his wife Lauren, and whispered something too quiet to hear. She followed his gaze. Her perfectly manicured brows lifted. I watched her lips part as she realized who I was. Not Leah, the forgotten sister. Leah Cartwright. Admiral of the Naval Cyber Intelligence Division. Rayburn leaned in. "Front row, left. Your seat is reserved. Follow me." I didn't hesitate. As we walked, I noticed how officers shifted aside. Some saluting, others just stepping out of the way. I caught the murmurs as we passed. Short, clipped phrases. "She outranks half the board." "Did you know she was coming?" I walked with posture squared, each step measured. Not out of pride, but precision. When we reached the front row, a junior lieutenant stood and snapped to attention, eyes wide. He hadn't expected anyone outranking Rear Admiral Fletcher to sit here. Rayburn simply nodded. And the young officer stepped aside. I sat. Not in defiance, not in rebellion, but in full, earned authority. And as I settled into the seat, shoulders back, eyes forward, the band struck the first note of the national anthem. I didn't look back. Because for the first time, they would have to look at me. The ceremony unfolded with all the precision of a naval chronograph. Opening remarks, flag presentations, acknowledgments from high command. I heard it all, but none of it truly registered. My attention drifted, not to the program, but to the subtle currents shifting around me. From the corner of my eye, I caught Marcus glancing over. Not often. Just enough to confirm I was still there. His posture was perfect, but his jaw flexed every few minutes. A micro-adjustment he couldn't control. A tic I remembered from childhood. He always clenched his teeth when something didn't go according to script. And this was never in the script. When the time came, his name rang through the courtyard like a bell. Commander Marcus Cartwright, front and center. The crowd applauded. Polite and proud. He rose, uniform sharp, shoulders back. Every inch the officer they had expected him to be. He accepted his commendation from Vice Admiral Nash, shook hands, saluted. All textbook. Then came the speech. He stepped to the podium, cleared his throat, and smiled. Not quite as easily as he had earlier. "I'm honored," he began, "to accept this promotion on behalf of every mentor, peer, and leader who believed in the chain of command and the responsibility it carries. Applause. He thanked his unit, his superiors, his peers. Then his tone softened. And of course, I owe everything to the people who shaped me long before the Navy ever did. The family segment. I want to thank my wife Lauren for standing by me through every posting and deployment, for keeping our home grounded when I was thousands of miles away. Polite laughter. A few nods. My mother, Eleanor Cartwright, who taught me that discipline and grace are not opposites, but companions. She smiled. Ever composed. And my father, Captain Thomas Cartwright, whose leadership taught me the difference between power and purpose. He paused then. The kind of pause that stretched longer than it should. Silence crept in. He looked up. And for the first time, his eyes locked on mine. It lasted less than a second. But in that flicker of recognition, I saw everything. The confusion, the tension, the rewiring of his entire internal order. And then he looked away. Swallowed. For everyone who has served before me and alongside me, he continued, forcing the words out with an audible shift. Thank you for your service, your example, and your sacrifice. There it was. No mention of me. Not a name, not a title. Just that brittle silence again, now dressed in ceremonial ribbons. But I didn't need his speech. Because my name had already arrived long before he opened his mouth. And when he stepped off that podium, the applause was beautiful. But it wasn't just for him anymore. After the ceremony, the crowd spilled onto the reception lawn like champagne foam. Bright, noisy, a bit oversweet. Families posed in clusters. Photographers snapped away. Brass plates clinked softly on linen-covered tables. I remained near the perimeter. Not hiding, but observing. Old habit. Besides, I was waiting. I knew he'd come. And he did. Marcus approached alone. No fanfare, no camera-ready grin. Just a man walking toward a question he didn't know how to form. He stopped 2 steps away. The look on his face was tight, like someone realizing he'd been reading the wrong script for years. Admiral Cartwright, he said. I returned his nod. Commander. He tried to smile, but it faltered halfway. I didn't know, he said, quiet but edged. No one told me you were still in service. Still relevant, I offered. Still existing. His jaw tightened. I thought you left after Annapolis. You never said anything. I held his gaze. You never asked. He looked away, hands sliding into the pockets of his dress blues. You could have told us. Would it have mattered? He didn't answer. I took a breath. Not angry, just clear. You had a version of me that worked for you. Quiet civilian background. Easy to manage. I let you keep it. That was my mistake. He blinked. I continued, softer now. You wanted the spotlight. I didn't. But don't mistake silence for absence. Something shifted then. Not big, not cinematic. Just a flicker. His mouth opened like he was about to argue, but nothing came. Instead, he asked, why today? Why now? I looked past him toward the flag still fluttering above the stage. Because it was time. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need permission to arrive. His lips parted again. And this time the question was more fragile. That operation in the Gulf. Last year. My carrier was rerouted mid-mission. Intel came in less than 6 minutes before deployment. You were. Yes, I said simply. That was me. He exhaled slowly. You saved lives. I did my job. A beat of silence passed between us, heavier than the years ever were. Then he said the only thing that mattered. Thank you. I nodded. And for a moment, neither of us moved. He wasn't my enemy. Not really. He was just raised in the same mirror I had shattered my way out of. He stepped back and offered a sharp salute. This time, the formality wasn't performative. It was respect. I returned it without hesitation. Then I turned and walked away. Not triumphant, not wounded. Just steady. Because the version of me they ignored had just walked into the daylight. And I wasn't going back. 3 days later, I was in Washington. The air inside the Pentagon was colder than usual. Filtered, clinical, detached. But I liked it that way. It made focus easier. The concrete of hierarchy was always less personal here. People didn't ask where you came from. They asked what you could carry. Admiral Rayburn called me into a secure conference room. No preamble, no smile. Just a thick manila folder slid across the table with my name in bold. Cartwright. They want you to lead the Pacific Hybrid Operations Unit. I raised an eyebrow. I thought they were grooming someone else for that seat. They were, he said. Until last week. Inside the folder were charts, satellite overlays, strategic gaps between joint forces. The job wasn't just about intel anymore. It was cyber counterops. Congratulations, Rayburn added. You're the new blueprint. I leaned back slightly, the leather chair creaking beneath my shoulders. What about JSC? I thought they had earmarked me for strategic command integration. He smirked. They had. Then someone showed them what happens when you show up at a parade and reset a family narrative in real time. I paused, thumb brushing the edge of the page. This comes with resistance. All revolutions do, he replied. I closed the folder and looked him square in the eye. I'm not here for a revolution. You're having one anyway, he said. You just do it quieter than most. That night, I returned to my apartment overlooking the river. Lights shimmered across the water. I could see the silhouettes of carriers in the shipyard far below, waiting for orders, waiting for movement. I poured myself a glass of water. No celebration, no phone call home. Instead, I stood at the window and whispered the title out loud. Commander of Pacific Hybrid Operations. It didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. And that's when the message came in, from an encrypted line I hadn't used in over a year. Marcus. Simple, direct. Can we meet? We did. The next morning, in a quiet cafe in Arlington. Civilian clothes, no insignia, no crowd. He arrived first. No swagger. Just a man who looked like he'd started seeing things differently. They offered me a liaison role, he said. Under your command. I stirred my coffee. Are you here to decline it? No, he said. I asked for it. That caught me off guard. I want to be where the right decisions are being made, he added. Where I can learn. I studied him for a long moment. Not searching for sincerity. Just wondering how long it had been buried. You sure you're okay working under your younger sister? I asked. He smiled. Sheepish, but real. I'm not sure I deserve the spot. But I know I'll be proud to serve in your chain of command. I nodded. Then let's get to work. And just like that, we stopped being a competition. We became a command. A week later, my mother invited me to dinner. No pretense, no occasion. Just a text that read, Sunday at 6. Just us. Marcus will be there. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Not because I didn't know what to say. Because for the first time I didn't need the invitation. But I accepted. When I pulled into the driveway that Sunday, the house looked the same. Brick siding, clean hedges, the flagpole still standing perfectly straight by the porch. But something was different. Maybe it was me. Marcus answered the door. No uniform this time. Just sleeves rolled to his elbows, setting the table like it was something he'd always done. You're on time, he said. You're early, I replied. We both smiled. Soft and simple. Inside, the smell of roast chicken and rosemary floated through the air. My mother moved between the kitchen and dining room like she was performing a familiar dance. But this time, she wasn't rushing. She wasn't correcting. She just let it be. My father stood at the head of the table when I entered. He didn't speak at first. Just nodded. Then, after a pause, he reached out his hand. Not stiffly, not ceremonially. But like he meant it. "Welcome home, Admiral," he said. The words settled in the air like warm ash. Quiet, but impossible to ignore. Dinner was steady. We talked about logistics, deployment updates, upcoming joint drills. My mother asked questions. Not to sound informed, but because she was curious. No one mentioned the parade. No one needed to. Over dessert, a simple peach cobbler, my father set down his fork and cleared his throat. It was the kind of sound that once silenced rooms. "You'll be the highest-ranking Cartwright in 4 generations." I didn't respond immediately. "You didn't inherit that," he continued. "You built it. And I was wrong not to see it." My mother reached across the table and gently touched my hand. "We were all wrong," she said softly. "But we see it now." I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, there was no performance behind her eyes. Just clarity. Across the table, Marcus raised his glass. To the sister who rewrote the standard. And for once, no one corrected him. We finished dinner without ceremony. The plates were cleared, the lights dimmed. And for a long moment, we just sat. Not as a family trying to fix the past, but as people quietly acknowledging a truth that had lived too long in the dark. Later, as I stood in the doorway, ready to leave, my father clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You made the name mean something again," he said. I looked him in the eye. "No," I replied. "I gave it something it never had." He didn't argue. He just nodded. 1 month after the promotion, I stood before my new office at the Pentagon. The plaque on the door read, Vice Admiral Leah Cartwright, Director of Pacific Hybrid Operations. It looked simple. Understated. But it was the culmination of every moment I had once lived in silence. Inside, the air was different. Advisors spoke slower when I entered. Senior officers adjusted posture. Not from protocol, but instinct. My name no longer traveled through back channels. It led meetings, signed off directives, and reshaped how command itself operated. Then the White House summoned me. The President herself, a former Navy veteran, had asked for a direct briefing. Indo-Pacific Joint Force Posture, Escalation Modeling, Cyber Breach Containment. I delivered it in 34 minutes. No slides, no fluff. Just clarity. When I finished, the room was still. The kind of still that doesn't question. That waits. The Secretary of Defense spoke first. "Admiral Cartwright, this isn't just operational foresight. It's doctrine-level thinking." The chairman of the Joint Chiefs added, "We've had admirals before. But never one who rewrote the playbook, ma'am." I gave a small nod. No thanks, no false humility. Just acknowledgement. Because I had earned it. That night, I walked along the Navy Yard alone. The water was quiet. The silhouettes of ships floated in the harbor like sentinels, watching, remembering. My phone buzzed. "Marcus." A photo appeared. My image on a new recruitment banner, stationed outside our old high school. Full uniform, eyes forward. Captioned in clean, bold font. "Earned, not inherited." Then his message followed. "They're quoting you now, Leah. Everywhere. You're not just a story. You're a signal." I stood there for a long time, watching the reflection of the ship lights shimmer across the pavement. Then I replied. "Then let's make sure the signal leads somewhere worth following." Because in the end, I hadn't fought for a seat at their table. I had built a new one. And left the door open. Not for them. But for whoever came next.